Hello again guys, and thank you for joining me. So if you've been inspired to learn how to use colour pencils, you've probably found yourself looking at those big sexy rainbow 120 pencil piece packs, and then you've seen the price and maybe not. Now, I don't know about you, but there is no way that I could ever afford to drop that sort of money on a medium that I'm not even sure that I'm going to enjoy using. So if you want to start using colour pencils, you've got a couple of options. Now, the first thing you could do is to go out and buy yourself some student grade colour pencils, and to be honest, that's where I started my collection. However, the problem with that is that the student grade colour pencils really they're just lacking. They don't have the same pigments and they can blend a little bit unpredictably, and you're not getting the full experience of what colour pencils really can do. And most serious students are going to grow out of those really quickly. Now, your other choice is to just dive straight into the deep end and pick yourself up a set of artist grade colour pencils. Now, the beginner may look at this little handful of pencils and think there is no way that they could create anything with this. I mean, realistically, these look like the same colours that we were using in kindergarten. How could you create anything sophisticated with this? But the secret is with colour pencils is that they mix together just like paint would. The only difference with this is that we mix our pigments directly on the paper instead of on a palette first. So here's a quick little chart to show you just how many colours we can create. On this grid, I have mixed each of the Polychromos colours that come in the basic 12 pack. Now, the order in which we layer these pencils can sometimes vastly change the end result, so I have made sure that each colour is layered in order and is as close to a 50-50 mix as I could get. I then blended them out lightly with thinners. I then completed a second chart for those of you who would prefer to purchase the Prismacolor pencils. And look at that! Even with just a really rough colour and blend, you can see that we've got a lot of possibilities here. Now, I'll have both of these charts posted to my website if you want to take a closer look. The link to that post will be in the description below. So here I'll put both charts up on the screen for you to see. And you can see here that this is just a 50-50 mix. This isn't even touching what we can create if we mix our colours in different ratios, or what will happen if we add more than 2 or 3 or 4 colours to each mix. With a little bit of practice, you can create nearly any colour that you can imagine with these 12 pencils. Okay, so I'm going to put this to the test. I have here some paint swatches that I've picked up randomly from my local hardware shop, and I'm going to try and get as close to these colours as I can using only the 12 pencils in the Polychromos set. Now, we might not be able to get an absolutely perfect match, but I've got a good feeling we'll be able to get pretty close. Now, unfortunately, there is no recipe book that I can give you to create the colours that you might like. The variations are absolutely endless, and surprisingly enough, all of these colours can be achieved by mixing colours in different ways. But I thought it might be helpful to allow you to watch over my shoulder as I make my choices, so you can see my process and maybe inspire you to practice your own colour matching skills. Okay, so I'm going to start with this blue colour here because I think it's going to be the easiest one to work with. And I've got my colour swatches all sort of put out on the side here so that I can see what colours I have to work with. And I do this all of the time with my entire set. I've got all of my colours charted out and I always refer to this. Basically, where am I going to start? I think the closest colour that I've got here is that phthalo blue. So I'm going to put a good layer of that down first. I always start with that most dominant colour and then we can tint and shift it from there. And it's a very strong colour, so I'm going to put down a pretty solid layer of this blue. Okay, now I'm looking at that and it's a very brilliant, cool blue, isn't it? So I think I need to warm that up a little bit to get to that colour. So I'm going to add some of that deep scarlet colour, just a very, very light layer over the top, just to bring that a little bit closer to that warmer colour. And you can see it's sort of darkening it up a little bit as we go. Bit more blue. Alright, it can be a little bit hard to tell before we sort of blend this together. We might be close already. So I'm going to blend this out and see how close we are. Oh, and it's not bad, is it? Maybe a little bit still too cool. Let's have a look closer. Oh, hang on. Maybe a smidgen darker. I really should wait for that to dry, but this isn't exactly a finished piece, so I'm just gonna race on ahead. And I'm just gonna dust on a little bit of that black. It's a little bit of sort of grey to that colour, so that black won't deaden it out too far. Okay, what do we got there? Hey, what do you know? That's pretty close. Alright, so that was pretty easy. Let's move on to this green colour. What are we going to use here? I think my closest colour here is the light green. And it's a very vivid light green, but I think it's the closest. So let's put a good layer of that down. Alright, so we can see here that that is way too bright. But we can certainly fix that. Now, I've got a couple of options here. I could dull it down with the brown, but I think that that might still be a little bit too light. And I think that the walnut brown is going to be just deaden the colour too much. So I'm going to attempt to use its complementary colour here with the deep scarlet and see if I can't sort of knock some of that intensity out of that green. I'm only going to add a very, very light coating. Where are we at? Now the advantage of using these complementary colours is that they darkens as well. Not only does it desaturate, but it'll darken your colour as well. And now that I'm looking at it, I think that maybe I could maybe yellow it up a touch. I could be wrong, we'll find out. Okay, add a bit more green. I think we might be getting close here. Okay, right, let's blend that out, clean brush. Definitely don't want any blue in this. What do we know, where are we at? We could definitely add a couple more layers here. Okay, maybe gone a little bit too far on the red. And just lift that up a little bit. That's definitely not the recommended method to do that, but I'm cheating. Oh, and I think that's pretty close. I'd be happy to call that a match. Okay, so last one up, and I'm going to do this fleshy kind of tone. And I think this one might be the trickiest. The first thing I'm going to do is add down a layer of white, because this is quite a light colour and I don't want my paper to get too dark. It's going to be impossible to lift back up if I make this too dark to start. So putting down this layer of white will just give me a little bit of protection between the pencil and the paper, and I'll be able to lift it up if I go too far. Okay, now I've got a couple of choices here. I think that either the burnt ochre or the cadmium orange could be a good call. I feel like I'm going to use the burnt ochre first and see where we can adjust it from there. Okay, so looking at what we've got here, this is quite a yellow sort of tone, and this is a lot pinker. So do I want to use the orange or the red? I'm going to add a very light coat of the red and see where we go from there. Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's get a little bit closer. Obviously quite a lot darker. Still a little bit more red in there. Okay, well, we'll blend that out and see where we can adjust it from there. Oh, hey. You know what? That might have been a little bit easier than I expected. What do we got there? Yeah. That's not too bad. Usually with sort of those more skin tones, you do find that you have to cool it down a little bit with some of the blue. But on this, I mean, obviously this isn't an actual flesh tone, it's a paint chip. I feel like we're pretty close there. Orange, maybe, maybe not. Ooh, ooh. Just a hair. I'm barely touching the paper with this one. Okay, let's blend that one out. Looking good. Now I went forward and I tried to colour match each of these colours using that same method of finding the closest colour I had on hand and then adjusting it warmer or cooler or darker or less saturated as I went. Now, doing this does require a certain amount of knowledge of colour theory, which I know it sounds really scary, but I promise you, you can learn really quickly with exercises just like this. Colour mixing is really difficult to learn from a book, but in practice you can pick it up in no time, and being limited in your colour selection can actually really help you pick up the basics, so that you can make the most of your pencils if you do choose to keep collecting. Now, a quick note here, there are some colours that you just won't be able to create from this selection. Really bright pinks and purples are definitely on this list, so if you want to draw floral pieces, you might like to pick up a couple of those brighter colours. And if you want to draw portraits, you might like to pick up some of the basic flesh tones just to make it a lot easier for yourself. So why would we spend a fortune on these massive sets of 120 pencils? Well, really, it comes down to convenience. You saw how I started each of those colour mixes, trying to get the colour that was as close to possible as to the colour that I was trying to achieve. And with a huge set of pencils, there's a better chance that one of those colours is going to be the closer to the one that you want. Also, those sets are really pretty, and when you start buying art supplies, it's kind of hard to know when to stop, and yeah, it can be a bit of a problem. But a huge collection like that is far from necessary. You really don't need to spend a fortune to start. Really, just pick up a set of 12 and build on your collection from there. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it helpful. Please feel free to leave me a like or a comment and let me know what you think. And if you'd like to see what I do next, why not hit that subscribe button? Thank you so much for watching.